Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth and the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case, the moral of the story. The guard leading me into the room gives a hard yank on the chain. Pain lances through my neck, and I snarl, baring my impressive fangs for full effect. He shies away, naked fear on his face, before remembering which of us is supposed to be the prisoner. "Watch it, Mutt, or you'll be drinking out of the toilet through a wired jaw," he says, his tough guy tone betrayed by the quaver in his voice and the stink of fear in his scent. I snort in contempt. Oh, please, C.O. We both know who's afraid of the big bad wolf. His expression hardens, mouth tightening into a white line. One hand drops to the baton sheathed at his waist. "That will do, officer," a new voice says. "I'll ask you to do your job without further violating my client's civil rights." I look past the guard and his impotent rage to see a man sitting at the lone table in the room. The space is dimly lit, a single flickering fluorescent bulb recessed in the ceiling behind a grating. But I've got good eyesight. The guy's so short his legs barely clear the edge of the chair. I take in his expensive suit, immaculately groomed hair, and a face so wrinkled and wizened it looks like a prune staked out in the desert for a week. He smells of cologne, silk, a hint of moldy straw, and... That's curious. No fear. Not a hint of that very familiar scent. Interesting. That must mean he's either stupid or a villain, like me. The guard secures my chain to a ring on the floor, giving me just enough play to reach my side of the table, then snaps a padlock on it with a loud click. He then steps back to stand against the wall. The short man's eyes, small, dark, and hard behind wire-rimmed glasses, flick to the guard. "Leave me alone with my client, if you please." "Not a good idea, buddy," the guard says, glancing at me. "You know who this is, right?" "Of course I do," the man snaps. "I also know the privileges that exist between the accused and his legal representation. Now, must I ask again?" The guard scowls, shakes his head, and leaves, slamming the door shut behind him. The lock on the door clicks loudly, too. I casually stretch as much as I can with the chain and collar, give a shake to fluff out my thick, gray fur. "Client, eh? Funny. I don't remember hiring a lawyer." The faintest of smiles ghosts across the man's face. "You haven't. Yet. But I'm certain you'll want to retain my services after you hear what I have to say." "Why's that?" I ask in the most bored tone I can manage. "Because I can make sure that you don't spend the rest of your life behind bars." I can't help it. My ears prick up at that. I force a derisive snort. "Not likely. They have a pretty good case against me. And that is precisely why you want me to represent you." A positively oily grin stretches his lips. "Allow me to introduce myself." 2 fingers extend to place a business card on the table between us. I glance down at it. "Mr. R, attorney at law, specialist in defense of the wrongly accused." The black letters stand out against the crisp white, cutting across a spinning wheel picked out in gold foil. Yeah, it's a dead giveaway. Mr. Ray, that'd be short for... He raises a small hand to stop me before I can say it. "I would prefer if we kept this from being a first-name relationship." Yellowed teeth glint as he grins again. Okay, I say, with a flick of an ear. Lawyer, now, huh? Previous line of work didn't suit you. Let's just say that it was far too labor-intensive. I find my new career to be much more rewarding. It also didn't require much of an adjustment, ethically speaking. So, Mr. R, it is for now. For that matter, what would you like me to call you? I shrug, a human gesture I've perfected over the years. Most people just scream wolf and run away when they see me. I see. Then I shall address you as Mr. Wolf, for simplicity's sake. Whatever. Now, Mr. R settles himself in his hard wooden chair. I'm familiar with the particulars of your case, Mr. Wolf, at least those that have been made publicly available. But perhaps you'd like to tell me your side of the story? Now, I actually laugh. My side of the story? Not a lot of people are interested in that. As far as most of them are concerned, there's only ever one side. The one where I'm the villain, just out to do villain things. It's just how the story goes. So you don't deny the charges? Well now, Mr. R, that'd be telling, wouldn't it? I may be facing the headsman's axe or life in a cage, but I don't see any reason to make it easier on everyone. Mr. Wolf, we in the legal profession are required to keep our clients' confidence and cannot be compelled to reveal what is told us in confidence. Okay. Whether he's telling the truth or not, I find I just don't care. Well, yeah, I did it. Whatever they say, I did it all. Mr. R removes his glasses, pulls out a kerchief, and starts polishing the lenses. You stalked young Peter and his friends and attempted to murder a duck, I believe. I pretend to wince. Yeah. Got so close, but she was just that lucky. I sigh. I can still taste feathers. And you destroyed the property of 3 industrious pigs? Hey, not my fault if their houses weren't up to code. Of course, then they tried to burn me alive. Lost a lot of fur on that one. Then you actually consumed a young lady and her grandmother? I give a little laugh. And the grandmother's cat. Not too many people remember that part, but I kinda missed out on the satisfaction of a good meal in the end. After I woke up on the riverbank, went through 3 surgeries to get all the rocks out of my belly, and spent 6 months in that stupid plastic cone. Well, let's just say that a certain woodsman is next on the menu if I ever get out of here. Mr. R finishes cleaning his glasses, sets them back in place, all without batting an eye. I see. So, you are guilty, and I must assume that the police have all the evidence they need, since you are sitting here before me, chained to the floor. I pull back my lips in a grin, or a snarl. Hard for me to tell the difference when I'm doing it. Like I said, I'm the villain. I do bad things. No matter how the story goes, that's always how it ends. It's the... what do they call it? The moral. That's right. The moral of the story. Bad people do bad things. Mr. R arches one scraggly eyebrow. What if I told you the story doesn't have to end that way? I cock my head to one side. How's that? Mr. Wolf, my job doesn't necessarily consist of proving you innocent, Mr. R says. Not when I can make you into a victim instead of a villain. Say what? That's right, Mr. Wolf. Instead of making this about your crime, we can make it about you. We'll play up your tragic past, your difficult upbringing. Why? You said it yourself. People look at you and see nothing more than a scary animal. That's prejudice. It's colored your entire life, hasn't it? Is all I managed to get out in reply. Honestly, I'd never thought about it like that. Do you have a mate? Mr. R asks suddenly. Pups? A pack that relies on you? Needs you? What? No, nothing like that. I give my head a shake, trying to wrap my head around all this. Are you saying that you can make it look like I was the victim instead of the villain? Exactly, Mr. Wolf. Now his grin looks positively evil. We'll put you in front of the cameras, paint you a tragic victim of circumstances and biases. All that's required is the right spin on the facts. And believe me, Mr. Wolf, I know how to put the right spin on things. No doubt. All of this is confusing and, well, kinda disgusting. Look, why go through all that? Just post my bail and I'll skip town, how about? I'm only half joking. Again, he arches that eyebrow. To go on the run? To be hunted and hounded the rest of your life? Now I grin. I'm the big bad wolf, remember? What you just described, that's my normal. It doesn't have to be, says Mr. R. When I'm through, you'll spend a few months in prison, after which you'll be set up for life. A comfortable den, plenty of game to hunt, even your own woods if you want. No one will dare bother you again. With enough positive media coverage, I can work out a very favorable deal for you. Deals are something of a specialty for me. Now, how's that sound? I stare at him, narrowing my eyes. What do you get out of this, Mr. Ray? Something tells me you're not doing it out of the kindness of your heart. He gives a short laugh. Oh, goodness no. You see, in the process of rewriting the narrative, there will be interviews, televised appearances, at least one book deal. That means money, Mr. Wolf. Rather, a lot of money. His oily grin reappears, and I get 50%. Oh, now that's disgusting, sickening. He wants me to lie about what I am, pretend to be something I'm not. A victim, a weak, pathetic, mewling victim, and all so he can exploit my villainy for cash? I don't know, I say. It all sounds like a big lie to me. And you've never lied before? Something about his tone of voice, so cocky and superior, makes my hackles rise. Literally. I seem to recall one of the charges is impersonating a little old lady. That's rather dishonest, don't you think? I growl deep in my throat. I like to think of it as deceptive. A predator has to be cunning after all. Indeed. Come now, Mr. Wolf. Let's stop bandying words. He lifts a briefcase onto the table, snaps it open, and produces a gold fountain pen with a flourish. You just sign these documents, and I'll get started turning you into the tragic victim. A victim. Me. I'm a villain. I made the choices that made me a villain, and to be honest, I never really regretted it until I got caught. If not for that woodsman, I'd still be out there, stalking Peter and his friends, blowing down pigs' houses, and looking for my next Little Red Riding Hood. But then, look where being the villain has gotten me. In this room, with a scumbag who wants me to lie, tell people a sob story, deny what I am just so I won't be punished for the wrong I've done, and he can make a lot of money. I think Mr. R is a worse villain than I am, and he's definitely not the kind of villain I want to be. Now let's get this straightened out, I say, the words coming out from behind bared fangs. I'm a villain. I know I'm a villain. I own that. I'd rather just accept that I've done wrong and take what I've got coming. Mr. R purses his lips like he's tasted something really sour. Mr. Wolf, please be reasonable. I think you'd better get out of here, Mr. R, before I start naming names, or I could just gobble you up. Your pick. Mr. Wolf. I lunge forward, straining the chain to its limits. Planting my forepaws on the table, I let out a savage bark, jaws snapping, spattering drool all over Mr. R's nice suit and shiny glasses. He lurches backwards, tumbling out of the chair, briefcase and pen flying across the room. A second later, he scrambles back to his feet, staring at me, eyes wide, and darts for the door. Now I smell it. The fear. Its stink is thick and rank. I guess he really isn't stupid. With one hand on the doorknob, he pauses, glancing back at me. You know they will never stop seeing you as a villain. They will hunt and persecute you, no matter what you do. Maybe so, I reply, suddenly tired of this whole thing. But maybe I've earned that. Maybe if I want that to change, I need to show them that I can change too. I shrug. So, even though I'm the villain in this story, maybe I can still do the right thing. Maybe that's the moral of the story, lifer. The parking lot was empty, except for dry weeds squeezing up through cracks in the asphalt, except for the deserted, rusting basketball hoop on one end, except for rustling leaves skittering across fading parking spaces in the gathering dusk, except for oil spots shimmering with rainbow colors after a recent sprinkling. The parking lot was empty, and, because fate is resourceful, a steady, gloomy rain started falling, blurring any hope of discovering the mysterious body called in by an anonymous tip. What's in the corner by that dilapidated chain-link fence? My partner, Andy, asked. Looks like piles of garbage bags being buried by soggy leaves from here, I answered. I'll circle around for a closer look. I detect movement. Do dead bodies move? Nah, just rats crawling all over. Better get out and take a good look. Bummer the rain is getting worse and the wind is picking up, turning this into a chilly, miserable autumn evening. Not even a sliver of a moon. Why is that always the way when a body shows up? Andy complained. Can't we simply call the coroner's office to come claim the neatly wrapped package? They would love that and have our badges if it turned out to be nothing more than trash. We gotta confirm whatever it is. Sorry. Get your slicker on and take your flashlight. I'll be ready to call it in. I pulled the squad car up as close as I could as he prepared to exit. Suddenly, lightning flashed, thunder pealed as a hail of bullets pounded the passenger side. Andy fell back inside his head, exploding and pouring gray matter all over me and the upholstery. Reacting instinctively, I spun out of the lot, laying new rubber on the old asphalt, and bumping over the crumbling center meridian, at the same time trying to figure from which gaping windows in the 4-story abandoned factory building the bullets were spewing. Cursing under my breath. F-ing prank call. How can this be happening? Collecting my scrambled wits, I squealed a UI about half a block away and paused on the side of the street, looking back at the front of the building. Like rats abandoning a sinking ship, perps were scurrying out of doors carrying backpacks and rolled-up bedding. They appeared homeless, but any of them were potential suspects, and they were all getting away along with the weapons while I was on the horn to Central. Like a crazy man possessed, I ground into gear and plowed ahead, showering taser rays from my weapon, aiming at legs to slow them down. So what if I hit a few with my bumper? We would need witnesses. Officer down, send armored SWAT, was all I remember shouting into the mic. I sped out of retaliation range and waited for backup, not knowing if any would be available. All I wanted to do was hold what was left of my friend and partner. An 18-year veteran of the force, he was already looking forward to retiring and spending more time with his beautiful wife, Jolene, and his teenaged sons, Andrew Jr. and Joshua. I remember watching those boys grow up. How am I ever going to face them? As the senior officer, I'm the one who was supposed to be protecting him. Instead, I delivered him into a hail of bullets. We let our guard down, dear boy. I don't have anyone waiting at home for me. Why couldn't it have been me with a new hole in the head? It can't even be an opened casket. No mortician can put the pieces back together. Bleak rain continued to fall into the chill autumn night, highlighted by blue and red strobing lights and streaking lightning punctuated by thunder. By the time the captain and lieutenant got there, I know I looked like a blubbering idiot, shivering and quaking. More squads and a special weapons van soon arrived. Don't go in there without armor and shields. I think it was a deliberate ambush set up to kill as many police as they could. Got a fake tip about a body being found, but we were supposed to deliver the bodies. I'd say the bullets were coming from the second and third floor broken windows, but so many people scrambled out of the building you may not find any evidence. Still, someone could be waiting to claim more victims. I put a few down out front. Gotta go find some more. Bet those defund the police activists are happy with this carnage. Force is already down to bare bones. Slim odds we'll be able to round up all them. Easy, Cooper. Look at yourself. You hit it all. You've done all you're going to do tonight. Lieutenant Kramer and I will handle it from here. Someone will assess how you're doing while we assess the situation. Captain Crane commanded. Soon, ambulances were on the scene with emergency medical technicians attending to those witnesses I hit and myself. Bloody, headless Andy was scooped into a body bag, and our pockmarked unit was hauled in for evidence. Ignoring all my protesting, I was delivered to the hospital and examined for holes. Hard to determine what was me and what was pieces of Andy. Really, Doc, I'm still in one piece. Only need to clean the gore off. I'll be all right. You're shaking like a leaf ready to fall. When I'm done with you, I'll assign a trauma evaluator before you crash and burn. Losing a partner like that will have long-term effects if left unaddressed. Doctor's orders. Time off while you see a therapist. I'll have the support of all the guys in the precinct. I'm not sure about a shrink, but I promise you, I'm gonna be someone's worst nightmare once I get back on the street to find the monsters that riddled us. They don't understand what they've created. I'll never retire. I'm a lifer now. You can bet. Gonna rain long-term regrets down on them. My friend Matilda, she did it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This all started when Sadie moved into a new home. 25 years old, a nice car, a new house, and a cat. She liked cats. They are self-sufficient, but at the same time, loving balls of fluff and affection. Her cat was always with her and followed her from room to room. Her cat, Matilda, was also her best friend. Not just words, they really were friends. They talked to each other and slept together. Moving into the house and setting it up was seriously the first adult thing she ever did. She got the house for a great price, and the previous owners told her they needed to sell fast because they took a job in California and needed to be there by the first of the month. She remembered this house when she was little. Her aunt lived here, and her mom and her would visit a few times a month. Her aunt had a little girl she played with when she was there. Maddie was her name. They loved playing dress-up and could play forever. She had a favorite doll she carried with her everywhere. It was an off-brand Barbie-type doll, but it was dressed like a hippie and had blue hair. Sadie thought that was the coolest doll in the world, and when they played, the doll went on adventures, traveled all over the world, and always came home from her trip and took a nap. Sadie and her mom went to the house one day, but Maddie wasn't there. Her mom told her she was gone. Sadie figured she had moved and went in to play with the toys again. But Sadie felt like Maddie was there, playing with her. Maddie told her she would be with her forever, and she was. Sadie and her mom would come over, and Sadie would go to Maddie's room and play. She knew Maddie was there, in the room. Maddie told her where she was, but it did not make sense. Sadie never told an adult what Maddie told her. They stopped going over to the house after a few months. She thinks they moved out and went to another town. She heard her mom telling someone that they went upstate. They never talked about where, nor did they mention a place, just upstate. Sadie grew up and did well in school. She knew things thanks to Maddie, and because of that, she got away with a lot that she shouldn't have. But once she started college, that feeling and precog inkling disappeared. These days, she never thinks about it. Lately, though, she's getting that little tickle again. She knows things and has a familiar feeling that she can't shake. At night, she dreams amazing dreams. During the day, she sees things around her, people, events, and places she dreamed about the night before. Maddie was back. The little girl, Maddie, not someone her age. She thought about that, and it made sense to her. She knew her at the age of 6 and 7, and to Sadie, Maddie would always be 7 years old and carry the hippie doll with blue hair. A few weeks after they moved into the house, Matilda started a strange ritual. When Sadie came home from work, Matilda would be in the corner of the living room, relaxed but seeming to be scared or nervous. She would walk over and pick her up, but this time, she realized the floor was a little soft. It felt spongy. She called a contractor, Robin and Wilhelmina Ruck, and on Saturday, he and his wife stopped by to evaluate the work. He measured, tested, and told her $600 to make it solid again. She agreed, and they would start on it Monday morning. The contractors lived a few doors away, and she had no issue telling them she would leave the key on a magnet in the mailbox next to the front door. At 8 o'clock, she left for work, leaving the key where she had said, and at 10:30 on the dot, Wilhelmina called and told her she needed to get home now. It took her half an hour to get home, and when she did, there were police cars, a coroner, and more people in front of and inside her home than she thought possible. As she parked at the end of her driveway, she was approached by a pair of plain-clothed detectives, a man and a woman. "Are you Miss Roberts?" the man asked. "I am." "What's going on?" Sadie asked. "I am Detective Marlowe, and this is Detective Finley. We are here investigating the incident in your living room." Okay, she was confused, and looking at her face, you could see the disconnect between what she knew and what they just said to her. Sadie said, "What incident?" Detective Finley asked. "You have no idea?" Sadie shook her head, hoping someone would fill her in. Detective Marlowe said, "It appears that your contractor opened a section of your floor this morning to do the repair you asked him to do and found something rather disturbing." She stared at him like he was about to grow a third eye. He looked at her, she knew, waiting for her to say something, but she didn't. He continued, "They found the remains of a child, wrapped in plastic, airtight. Her neck was broken. Can you shed some light on any of this?" "Number, I can't. I bought this house a month or so ago and moved in. I always liked this house and was happy it went on the market." Detective Finley said, "You are familiar with this house?" "In a way. When I was little, maybe 6 or 7 years old, my mom and I used to visit here. I called the lady Aunt Roberta. I think their last name was Powell. Now I realize she was not any relation, just a friend of my mother. She had a daughter, Maddie, that I played with when I was here." The detective added, "What happened to them?" "All I remember is that they moved upstate." "Where upstate?" Marlowe asked. "No idea. All they ever said was upstate, never a city name." "Can we speak to your mother?" "How can we get in contact with her?" Finley asked. Sadie smiled ever so slightly. Before she could speak, Finley asked, "Why the grin?" "I have a rather interesting sense of humor. Always have. I almost told you to contact my mom by seance, which made me smile. My mother died a couple of years ago from cancer." "Sorry to hear that." Both detectives narrowed their eyes at the comment, but they let it pass. "Is there anyone you know who can tell us about Roberta and Maddie?" "I have no clue. Until last night, I forgot all about this." Both detectives showed a curiosity in their eyes, speaking together. "Last night? It's kinda silly, but I dreamt about Maddie and I last night. We played in her room as our parents had coffee and sat at the kitchen table. Probably because yesterday I went up to the attic and it looked like no one had been there in a long time. It was covered in dust. But I found a box marked Maddie's things. I opened it and found a hairbrush, her favorite one. We used to brush each other's hair back then." "Can we get that brush?" Marlowe asked. "Of course. It is still in the attic. Pull the cord in the hall and climb up. There is no light up there, so you'll need a flashlight." "You said it was covered in dust. Was there any disturbance in that dust?" Marlowe asked. "Well, other than my footprints, my shoe prints actually, there were children's prints in the dust. Bare feet. They looked fresh, so I thought the previous owners had a kid who went to the attic once before moving. We need to check out that attic." Marlowe looked at Finley, who nodded. He donned gloves and booties and headed into the house. "Can we go inside? I would like to see how much of my home is disassembled." Finley gestured, and they went into the house. The contractor sat at the breakfast bar, and Sadie walked over to them. Finley followed. Mr. Ruck said, "It appears your floor was so bad because someone removed and did not properly replace it after they buried the body. At that moment, the clear plastic containing the bones of a child was extracted from the floor." Sadie looked at it and was shocked. "That's Maddie," she exclaimed. "How do you know?" "That doll, it's unmistakable. She took it everywhere with her. Maddie and I used to play with it all the time." Finley walked over and looked at the digital images they had taken before they moved the bones. She looked and found the doll. In the image, the skeleton was lying on its back, the doll on its chest, and the hands of the victim holding the doll. Whoever did this knew the relationship between the girl and the doll. Finley returned to the three onlookers as Marlowe returned with the box of Maddie's possessions. "I found the brush. Maybe we can make a positive ID of the little girl," he said. Finley replied, "No need." Sadie made a positive ID. He looked at the skeleton. "How?" "That doll, they played with it when they played together." "Are you certain, Miss Roberts?" "I am. I know it. I feel it. Look at the doll. On its left hand, you'll see a couple of fingers missing. Her cat chewed them off." She grabbed the tablet and found the picture of the left hand. Fingers were missing. "Okay then. Maddie has been found and will be properly laid to rest. First, our ME needs to examine her. She was my friend when I was little. Let me know when I can properly bury her. We'll keep you informed." They left the house, and in a few minutes, the other cops and everyone else left. Mr. and Mrs. Ruck and Sadie were left alone. Matilda came from the back of the house and hopped onto the counter. She snuggled to her owner. "I think I will call it a night. I can take care of it in a few hours tomorrow. I have all the measurements, and the detectives said they would not need to return to the hole. So, tomorrow, it will look like it was never an issue." "Thank you." He walked over and covered the hole with a tarp, stapling it to the plywood around the hole. Sadie knew it was a critter barrier and to stop the weather from getting into the house. Once they left, Sadie sat on the couch facing the hole. Matilda sat on her lap but had not moved for over an hour. Maybe 15 minutes passed, and the hair on Matilda's back started to rise. Sadie felt it too. The room got cold, and the hairs on Sadie's neck began to rise. Matilda's back was hunched, and she was staring at the tarp. Her eyes focused on the tarp, and her pupils were their maximum size. She was looking for something, or she saw something. The tarp pushed up slightly, and Matilda hissed. Sadie calmed her. As she did, she saw her friend rising through the tarp, and she was holding the doll. More precisely, she could see through her friend. "Thank you." Her words sounded distant, echoed like they were in a great cavern. A moment later, Maddie began to fade until she was gone. Matilda settled back onto Sadie's lap. "Well, Matilda, I know now why I had to buy this house. Maddie needed to rest, and we needed to help her." Matilda gave the strangest meow Sadie had ever heard, and then started purring. Sadie sat on the couch a bit longer, thinking of playing with Maddie. It was a good memory. She did it. Now, her friend can rest, escaping neutrality. "Good morning, Derek." "Morning, Doc. How are you feeling today? Any more thoughts of harming?" I had to interrupt her. Dr. Fuller was one of the better shrinks I'd had to deal with, but she was a real job's worth about following the script. It would be the same old introductory questions. She couldn't help but tick those boxes at the top of the day's crisp white form, still warm off the copier, but would be terrified of doing so unless I actually said the words. I struggled to find the patience to verbalize my repeated and identical statements. "Ever noticed how stark our world has become?" I asked out of the blue, cutting her off to her obvious annoyance. She sighed, then visibly gathered up a well-practiced decorum. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, abandoning the prescribed sheet for later and joining my real conversation. I was proud of her. "I mean that when we were children, the world was full of color. I'd wait to cross the road and see cars of gold, green, red, and blue fly past. I'd look down the street, and every house would be trimmed with sage guttering, burgundy window frames, or dark blue front doors. My bedroom was even painted a musky orange and had deep brown carpets at one point. It really offset the crimson of my lava lamp and the teal of my inflatable couch. But today, what do you see when you look around?" I still see some of those things, but you're right. Most things are far more tastefully done these days. Do you miss your childhood? Would colorful surroundings bring you more comfort as you had back then? Tasteful, classy, reserved, miserable, soul-destroying, I said, hammering my point home and ignoring her textbook questions. Dr. Fuller really needed to up her game, but what could I expect from someone so new to the field? And so young. "I bet you drive a white car, huh, Tasha?" "Doctor." "Fuller, please, Derek." "Yes, I do." "Why is that relevant?" "Well, I know for a fact that they've made white the cheapest option. For any splash of color whatsoever, you have to pay a premium now. Is it any wonder that every modern car you see in the road is now white?" "I suppose not. Most, like me, cannot afford the extra expense. What are you getting at here, Derek?" "Only that the world was fading, having its color drawn out, far before I was ever denied the sight of it." I did not register her next question. Her side of the conversation always included a question. I was distracted by the spontaneous idea that Dr. Fuller would have an office somewhere, and that there was a chance it might not be quite as bland as her car. Its walls might be covered in bright book spines, all in clear view from the comfortable, deep maroon couches. A myriad of certifications in shining wooden frames would sit side by side with calming vistas, no doubt depicting an unnamed ocean of calming blue spotted with colorful sailboats. I imagined it as being quite pleasant. Perhaps she was right. A throwback to my early years, drenched in technicolor, might have offered me some contentment, useless to contemplate. I would never again see such a sight in this life. My imagined home for the dear doctor was a far cry from our current reality. Whitewashed concrete encased the bare room I was forced to meet her in daily. Gray, steel chairs and a matching table offered the only tint to the otherwise monochrome box. Tasha's wardrobe of endless white blouses and gray skirts might have been a choice, but I expected it was simply a subconscious effort to conform to the washed-out world that we both inhabited. "Did you hear what I said, Derek?" she asked, ducking her head to try and catch my vacant eyes. "No," I answered honestly. "Where were you?" Credit. Where credit is due, the doc had some skills. Instead of accelerating with her own agenda, she was able to pull into my lane at a moment's notice. Time to knock her off the road. "I was imagining where I would find you, outside of this place. Without these," I said, staring her directly in the eye and pulling sharply on the handcuffs that strapped my wrists to my chair. The loud and sudden clink of the metal chain startled her, and I watched as her pupils dilated in fear. It was the little pleasures. Telling the truth, but in a way that elicited the reaction I desired. It was all the entertainment I could find anymore. I thought she was done after that. Figured she would flee, never to return, to be replaced with yet another box-checking drone, fresh out of shrink school, wanting to prove they could handle the worst of the worst. Instead, she surprised me. "You will never again be without those, Derek, nor will you ever see the outside world freely. My job here is only to determine which walls will hold you. Do you understand that?" Tasha said, setting her jaw and returning my stare. Always another question with Doc Fuller. "I understand completely. I am not a simpleton," I snapped. Her resilience annoyed me. "I agree. It's quite the opposite, I think. You are clearly very intelligent, Derek. After these few sessions, I can see you are more than capable of self-reflection. So shall we stop wasting each other's time and get back on task? Pass your psych evaluation, and I'll put my recommendation in that you be transferred to Parkhurst and allowed regular yard time. Keep driving away your doctors and avoiding the issue with talk of cars and old bedroom decor, and you will remain here, isolated on the psych ward, for the rest of your sentence." "For the rest of my life," I corrected her. "If that is what you want, then I may as well leave now." She didn't move, a weak gambit that rarely fooled children. It never convinced mine. To use it, you had to be willing to follow through. I could never bring myself to let them out of my sight, much as Dr. Fuller would never have the courage to walk out of that door on the gamble that I'd call her back. I decided to give her the victory anyway. Let her feel powerful for a moment, before I took it all away. It would be preferable to see the blue of the sky again, I conceded. White rooms with gray furniture, guarded by monochrome uniforms, and visited by equally starkly adorned doctors, I said, gesturing at her up and down. I might as well be in heaven already for the level of cloud cover that surrounds me. "Do you believe in heaven?" Tasha asked, and just like that, with yet another question, the session resumed. It was the most personal question she had asked me yet. Her confidence was growing. I could not allow it to dwarf my own. Number she would need to regain her fear of me soon. I refused to admit that her earlier stoicism had ruffled me, yet I felt a growing urge to get the upper hand once more. She knew all too well I could never get close enough to harm her physically. I was too notorious for that kind of carelessness from the guards. I'd need to break her from a distance, and I planned to. Of course, don't you? I countered. I'm not sure. I am yet to hear a convincing argument either way. Coward, I whispered. Belief is not something you can be convinced of. Do you believe you are destined for heaven, Derek? Why not? I asked. God forgives us all for the weakness of our flawed human existence. All we need do is seek and accept it. And you have asked for forgiveness? She ventured. I could hear the eagerness in her voice, the building excitement that it could be that easy, that I could give her what she needed to scribble on her form and sleep easy, knowing she had succeeded in bringing a lost cause back from the brink. For what? I feigned ignorance. Baiting her was so easy. For your crimes. Come on, Doc. You can say it. I paused for only a second before exploding forward across the table as far as my clasped wrists would allow me, raining spittle that peppered her damn forms as I roared my best imitation of a literary detective. For murder most foul? I almost missed her reaction for my laughter. Psychologists were such fun. When will they realize that some behaviors are chosen simply for the entertainment of it, rather than the result of some past trauma? As it was, my eyes cleared from joy-induced tears just in time to see her recovering herself and returning to a normal position after trying in panic to escape her pale, metal seat. You can try to scare me all you like, Derek, she said with breaths that had not quite slowed, but I won't be leaving. Not as a result of any action of yours. I am your last chance, and I don't intend to be the reason this system fails you. All mirth left me, and my face dropped into a practiced blankness. I decided in that moment it was time to try a little more earnestly. No longer for my own enjoyment, but because I knew a truth that Tasha had yet to realize. I was never going to be transferred, no matter what I revealed to her. The only way I was ever going to see anything but the consuming whites of my cell again would be by my own hand. So, there was little point in her dance. I needed only one thing from the good doctor, and to get it, I wanted her distracted, nervous, and off-script. Straight-backed, head high, and glasses once more pushed up on her nose, Tasha Fuller tried her best to ignore my outburst and proceeded to ask her next question. So, whether to God or man, you understand that you need to ask forgiveness for the deaths you caused? No, I said musically. I never stated the reason I would require forgiveness. No, my prayers are more centered around lust and gluttony. There are few pleasures left to me other than my imagination and my meals, I said, winking at the pretty little doctor. An exaggeration for her benefit. I could not truthfully admit to enjoying the white mush of potato and gray mystery meat I ate daily. Thinking of her, though, that worked. I liked them pale. Derek, you are incarcerated here for the murder of your wife and 2 daughters. Do I need to explain to you again the gravity of your situation? If myself and my colleagues cannot determine an underlying cause for your violent behavior, then you are facing a lifetime of being classed as criminally insane. Would you rather a continuation of the treatment you get here, or are you willing to embrace the chance we are giving you? At Parkhurst, you might truly find rehabilitation. All of that is at your discretion, Doc. I am here, I am an open book. I have never lied. Not once. I pride myself on honesty, I said, raising my chin in challenge. If you want the answers you seek, you simply need to ask the right questions, instead of these meaningless generalities. I watched her scour her memory and her notes, her eyes darting, looking for the truth in my words, until my meaning dawned on her. Why? Why did you do it? She asked immediately, blessedly direct. Finally, I sighed. Sometimes, after all that education, all that introspected study and exploration of the human condition, all you need do is ask a simple, straightforward, common sense and normal question. Why did I kill them? I was saving them. I heard the click of her pen and the scrawling of notes behind the steel clipboard. Now I had her, beyond her strict training, out of her depth. Saving them from what? She asked, the interest bright in her eyes. They were under the power of demons. Their lives were already forfeit. I released their souls from their torture to be claimed by the sky, where they wait for me to join them. I would be there already if I were a stronger man. I shook my head and dropped my gaze, genuinely lamenting at my failure. Her scribbling continued for a few moments longer, before stilling the room to silence. You thought your family were possessed by demons? Dr. Fuller attempted to confirm. Are you stupid? I yelled, snapping my head back up to meet her scrutiny. It was the only part of my body I was allowed autonomy over during the sessions. I didn't say possessed. I said they were under the power of demons. Through their muted screens, the endless stories pumped into their gray matter turned them into walking avatars for another's narrative. Their minds warped, their perception altered, and they were no longer the girls I knew. They began spouting the same garbage that was looping into our home from the black and gray bordered rectangles of controlled light. The only color in their lives coming from what was gifted by monsters via LED, while they systematically stole it from any other pursuit. My family became puppets to an evil's will. I took their souls and put them out of reach. I surrendered them into the protection of a power that exists in true light and color above our poisoned planet. I could feel my chest heaving. The passion from my torrent of words pumped through my veins. I could not stop the tears from streaming down my cheeks, the sobs from racking my body. My grief over the actions I had been forced to take broke free. It was real. I should not have had to take such drastic action, but it had been the only way. I heard the scrape of her chair as she pushed it back and rose, smelt the flowery perfume that wafted before her as she approached, and shuddered under the warmth of her hand on my shoulder. When the good doctor crouched and put her face on a level with mine, I hesitated. Her words were so kind. It's all right now, Derek. I'm going to make sure you get the help you need. This would be a hard lesson for her to learn. I slammed my forehead into her glasses, shattering them against her face, and feeling the bone in her nose crack. It took a moment of delay for her body to catch up, but then quickly, crimson blood flowed down her face from her nose and the cuts around her eyes. I was not sure if it was hers or my own that I tasted on my cut lips. The deep red that painted our faces in unison was a desperately welcome tone amongst the stark. True color suddenly swamped the pallor of my world. It was glorious. It was relief. It was satisfaction. My head hit the back of my cell with such force that I feared the guards had already done the work for me. I laid still, stunned by the blow, and waited for my monochrome world to refocus. The white room and strong lights pierced inward, accelerating the headache that was to come. They would be back to take me to the infirmary soon enough. First, they would need to rescue poor Dr. Tasha Fuller from her minor injuries. She deserved their attention. She was the best shrink I'd ever had. She'd healed me and didn't even know it. From between my teeth, I dropped the shard of glass I'd bitten from her broken optics. I took it between my now free fingers and readied myself to join my family in salvation. From my body would birth a refuge of color amidst the sea of white. Just as they had, I would arise from a pool of bright crimson. Bathed at its center, I would finally be able to ascend to where a full spectrum of light would welcome me home, dressed for ruin. On a sticky Saturday evening in downtown Philadelphia, the line for Evie's Eden wrapped around the block. Blaring, fast-tempo music and strobing neon invaded the detectives' senses as they pushed their way through a throng of warm, gyrating bodies to take a seat at the bar. The stench of sweat and stale beer permeated the dark room, and the rush of frigid air from the vents above offered minimal relief from the stifling heat. The officers shouted to make themselves heard over the din, while several people almost knocked the men from their seats in their drunken attempt to squeeze between them and get the bartender's attention. The younger of the two men, a clean-shaven blonde with neatly combed hair and stern hazel eyes, tugged at his tie and scowled at a group of scantily clad women with neon-painted bodies as they approached him. They gave him sour looks and a few rude gestures in return before scampering off to find a more willing recipient of their affections. His partner looked down on most of the room at almost 6 feet. Gray streaked through his dark, purposely disheveled hair, and there was a hard glint in his cobalt eyes. His broad shoulders and well-built barrel chest, along with the faint scars littering his arms, made Vincent look less approachable than the blonde detective. The illusion was broken by the deep laugh lines etched into his cheeks as he chuckled and teased his dour partner. "You didn't have to scowl at them like that. The poor girls were just being friendly." The blonde scoffed, rolling his eyes as he said, "I'm not interested in their kind of friendship. Besides, we're here to work, not socialize, remember? Speaking of, should we really be consorting with criminals to solve cases?" Vincent ordered a Corona and lime from a bartender even taller than him, with bubblegum pink and deep purple hair, styled in a short mohawk. He accepted the drink with a charming grin and left a generous tip before facing his partner, ignoring his disapproving glare. Criminals make the best informants. This one has helped us with a lot of cases. Her information network is invaluable. The younger detective grit his teeth, holding back an argument. No matter his feelings, the boy had to accept that their case had gone from nearly solved to stone cold in less than 24 hours. They needed whatever help they could get. Vincent's partner tugged at his tie. Sweat rolled down the boy's neck and stained his collar. He had tried to convince him to change out of his uniform, but was unsurprised when he refused. He wondered if the stubborn boy regretted it now with the sweltering heat pressing in on them. Vincent downed his drink and ordered another while his partner gave in, removing his tie and unbuttoning the top 2 buttons. The young detective barked another question before Vincent could comment. "Where is this informant then? Every minute we waste here is another our suspect has to flee the country." "Oh, I don't think we have to worry about that. She should be here there she is." They turned their attention to the top of a metal staircase at the back of the club. Vincent's throat felt dry despite the 2 drinks he'd already finished as he watched his old friend step through the VIP entrance. She gave her white suede jacket to the doorman with an alluring smile, then turned to face the officers as she descended the stairs. Diamond-studded gold stilettos clicked against the metal as she went. Her strapless, midnight pantsuit with a plunging neckline swayed around her ankles and long legs, but cinched tightly at her waist to accentuate wide hips and hug her chest. The fabric shimmered under the strobing neon lights, and the diamond choker that cascaded down her throat like a waterfall and nestled between her breasts flashed brightly. Smooth olive-toned skin contrasted the gleaming jewels perfectly. Bright copper ringlets spilled partially over one shoulder. The rest pulled back with a clip to show off the shaved right side of her head. Russet painted lips with a prominent cupid's bow, dark thick lashes, and a chocolate smoky eye highlighted her high cheekbones and bright electric blue eyes. Vincent turned to face his partner as he scoffed and said, "You're joking." "Nope." "Detective, I'd like you to meet Evelyn Ross." "Evelyn, this is my new partner, Connor Williams." Connor was so distracted by her appearance that he hadn't realized she was walking right toward them. Evelyn smiled coyly and extended an intricately manicured hand. Tiny rhinestones were arranged in a rose design on every other stiletto-shaped nail, which were painted to match her eyes. Her breathy tone was deeper than Vincent remembered and laced with expertly veiled sarcasm. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Detective." Reluctantly taking her proffered hand, Connor forced an awkward smile and said, "Likewise." Her lips twitched with amusement as she dropped his hand, then turned to speak to Vincent with something akin to fondness. "Join me for a drink?" "Of course." Evelyn lifted a panel and moved behind the bar towards a burgundy-painted steel door. Vincent 2 steps behind her. Connor followed, but the senior detective shook his head and said, "Wait here. Get a drink or something. I won't be long." Then, before Connor had a chance to question him, Vincent followed the gang leader through the door. As the steel door to Evelyn's office closed behind him with a click, a chill washed over Vincent's face and arms, leaving goosebumps in its wake. A faint aroma of vanilla and dark cherries replaced the reek of sweat. Vincent's stiff shoulders relaxed at the familiar scent. 4 sleek leather armchairs surrounded a mahogany card table, and a personal bar stood in the far left corner. An ashtray made of cobalt glass sat on the table, clean and empty of any remnants. Vincent's fingers itched for the smokes tucked in his breast pocket. A single painting of a man and 2 women performing around a piano hung on the wall opposite him. It had hung there since the day it went missing from a museum in Boston some 30 years ago, when he was barely a thought. Evelyn's office was quiet, except for the clinking of glass as she poured them drinks. The reinforced concrete walls, painted evergreen, blocked out all trace of music or chatter from the club. Vincent sunk into the cool, smooth leather, stifling a sigh. Evelyn sauntered over to the table, sitting on top directly in front of him and crossing her legs before handing him his glass. Vincent enjoyed the bitterness of the bourbon as it washed over his tongue and slid down his throat. She always did have the best taste in liquor. Vincent watched his old friend curiously as she set the glass aside and leaned close to pull 2 camel blue 100s and a lighter from his front pocket. Her lips just shy of grazing his stubbled cheek, and the heady aroma of vanilla and dark cherries briefly overwhelmed him. Electric blue eyes dancing with mirth bore into his as she slipped the cig between his teeth and lit it for him. Then, a rush of clarity and disappointment hit hard as she sat back to light her own. Curls of white smoke drifted from her lips and slowly filled the room. She stared him down with a raised brow until the cigarette had burnt down almost to the filter. Then she said, "So, you going to tell me what you want?" He raised his own brows and grinned teasingly as he answered, "Can't I just come to see an old friend?" Her unimpressed stare pulled a snort of laughter from his lips. She held her hand out expectantly and retorted, "Not when you have your dog waiting outside." Vincent relented with a sigh and pulled a file from inside his jacket, which she snapped from his fingers and threw open on the table next to her. The detective lowered his leg from the table and leaned forward to look over its contents, which she was flipping through with a carefully placid expression. The faces of 15 young women stared up at him, all of whom had gone missing within the last 6 months. The final photograph in the file was a mugshot of a man with beady gray eyes, greasy black hair, a pudgy face, and a sad, wispy little mustache. Vincent watched Evelyn's face carefully as her bright eyes paused on his picture, looking for any sign of recognition. If she did know the man, she wasn't giving it away, so he decided to probe her a little. He's our main suspect. Goes by the name Rob, full name Robert Carroll. We've been tracking him down for a month, even got a hit on his hideout. Then we go in for the raid last night, and he's gone without a trace, so now we've hit a dead end. Do you recognize him? Evelyn placed the picture back in the file, closed it, and took a generous sip from her drink before answering with a carefully even tone. Afraid not, should I? Vincent kept his own tone light as he pushed a little more. Well, our files say he was one of your men until about a year ago. You've made it a point to know the names of everyone who works for you, haven't you? The stare she pinned him with was bitterly cold, and her breathy voice took on a dangerous edge. My organization doesn't deal in sex trafficking, a fact of which I know you're quite aware. Yes. I'm also very aware of how you've punished those who have gone behind your back in the past, which is why I thought you might be able to help me find my suddenly missing suspect. The way her lips curled into a cruel sneer and her face turned away confirmed his suspicions that she was involved in Robert's disappearance. He sighed as he put out his cigarette, stood, and placed his arms on either side of Evelyn's hips, caging her in. She met his gaze with pursed lips as he asked, "Where is he, Evie?" The brazen woman leaned forward, trailing her sharp nails down the side of his jaw and over his chest. The coy smirk was back as she goaded him. "If I did know where he is, why should I hand him over to you? My men are mine to punish. That's the deal we made, remember? This isn't some petty drug dealer who stole from you. This man is responsible for the disappearance of 15 women that we know of. Who knows how many are still alive? Their families deserve justice." Evie rolls her eyes and scoffs at his appeal to her better nature. "Oh yes, sitting comfortably in a jail cell watching TV and getting 3 meals a day sounds like justice to me. Those families deserve to see him strung up and castrated. Try again." Vincent muttered a curse under his breath. If it were anyone else, he would just get a warrant, but Evelyn had become untouchable in the last few years. She had half the department, the mayor, even their state senator in her pocket. No one would dare sign a warrant against her, and she'd never take a threat from him seriously anyway. Time to change tactics. He wove his left hand into her ginger curls, running calloused fingers down the back of her neck. She tensed at the contact and repressed a shiver, but the goosebumps erupting over her arms and the excitement in her eyes gave her away. Encouraged, Vincent pressed his forehead against hers and whispered, "For me, then, as a favor to an old friend?" Her nails grazed his cheek again as she glowered. "Right. A friend who only comes to see me when he wants something. I feel a little used. Maybe you could give me something in exchange for my kindness." "What do you want?" He could guess the answer, had known her long enough to read the cues. In their previous meetings, she had always treated him like he was just another business partner, careful to keep her distance, giving no hint toward their long-standing and complicated friendship. Her forwardness now was telling, but he wanted her to say it. A selfish part of him needed her to admit that she had missed their closeness. Evie pushed him back into the chair, placing her knees on either side of his and pulling herself close. Her hand left his cheek, burying itself into his messy dark locks, gripping tight. Evelyn's electric blue eyes bore into his as she said, "Don't play dumb, Vince. It doesn't suit you, and I'm not in the mood for any more games." It was as much of an admission as he was going to get, and Vincent gave in with a groan as he pulled her lips to his in a bruising kiss, one that she returned with just as much vigor. Sometime later, Vincent watched with hazy satisfaction as the cobalt lace of Evie's lingerie disappeared back underneath her shimmering silk outfit. When Evie faced him with an equally sated look, he took a moment to appreciate her swollen, though still perfectly painted lips. Her hair, which he had torn from its clip, cascaded over her shoulders in a wild tangle of curls that made her look deceptively innocent. One could almost mistake her for a normal woman like this, instead of a dangerous crime boss. He wondered how many others had been permitted to see her that way, then scolded himself for hoping he was the only one. Vincent gave up that chance a long time ago, the day he swore his oath and joined the police force. Even this small indulgence was one he shouldn't have allowed himself. Once they finished straightening themselves, the pair looked at each other. Vincent lamented the return of Evelyn's closed-off expression that had been so open and vulnerable under his touch just a few minutes ago. But their time was up, and he came here for a reason. He struggled to keep the regret out of his tone as he asked, "So, where can I find Mr. Carroll?" Evelyn grinned playfully, hips swaying as she walked over to the bar, picked up a cell phone, and hit one of the speed dial numbers. After a few moments, the call picked up. Her orders were curt. "Bring him in." A side door that Vincent swore was a wall before opened, and a beat-up, barely conscious man who matched Rob's description to a T was shoved through by two bulky, suited thugs. Rob, with hands tied in front of him, collapsed to his knees. The thugs backed out without a word, and the door shut behind them, leaving nothing but smooth wall in its place. Evelyn laughed at his incredulous glare and said, "He's all yours, detective." Vincent rolled his eyes and strode over to the quickly fading man, tossing a sarcastic remark over his shoulder as he yanked the suspect up. "If you were going to hand him over anyway, why bother making such a fuss?" She giggled and walked over to open the burgundy door for him. He could already see his younger partner's expression morphing from annoyance to surprise and disbelief. Evie's breath at his ear sent a tingle down his spine. "Well, I thought he would make a good gift, but I wanted something too. Don't pretend you didn't enjoy it." He glanced to the right to meet her roguish grin as she continued, "Happy birthday." Connor took the unconscious trafficker off his hands, so Vincent turned back to Evie, who stood in the doorway with arms crossed, looking way too pleased with herself. He had forgotten that his birthday was tomorrow, and that it was something he and Evie shared. Vincent chuckled wryly and carded a scarred hand through his hair as he thanked her. Then he helped Connor drag their suspect out to the car, tossed him in the back, and settled into the driver's seat. From the corner of his eye, he saw his partner open his mouth, most likely to barrage him with questions. "Don't ask. It's complicated. But now you see what I was saying about Evelyn being one of our best informants. This isn't the first time she's handed our guy right to us, and it probably won't be the last." Connor didn't press for more information. He faced front with a thoughtful, almost conflicted look, and the ride to the station passed in silence. A silence that Vincent spent thinking of her, of their bodies pressed together, and foolishly wishing that he could do it again. Trial by egotism. The Honorable Judge Harold Brybar strode to the bench bearing a coy smile. The court knew that smile well, as did millions watching on view screens all over Mars, as did tens of millions back on Earth who wouldn't get the feed for another hour or so. They also knew the arch of his thick gray eyebrows, the well-trimmed salt and pepper hair he'd gracefully let recede, the petite spectacles he wore when reading, and the mild way he cleared his throat to bring the whole courtroom to attention. In offense to all known theories of jurisprudence, Judge Harold Brybar was a celebrity judge, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. As Brybar sat down, he produced his legendary gavel from the folds of his cloak. It was the gavel that had sent General Sabrina Gallo to the slammer. It was the gavel that had brought justice to the ungrateful eight. It was the gavel that had, so mournfully, let the Scarlet Assassin walk on a series of technicalities. Years ago, a rookie reporter dubbed it the cinematic hammer of justice, and the moniker stuck, though Brybar only laughed and shook his head ruefully when asked about the moniker. Chekhov would have surely side-eyed this fabled instrument of law and order. "This should be the final day of the trial," Judge Brybar said, after customarily clearing his throat. "If Miss Toddle's statement runs long, we'll cut for lunch at 11. How long do you think you'll go?" He flashed a smile at the defendant. "An hour should do it." Marissa Towdle flashed a smile right back between lips stained dark red. She came to court in a maroon pantsuit with a long matching jacket that almost reached the ground, and dark lipstick and fingernail polish to match. Stylish, but for her, understated. Earlier in the trial, she'd favored brighter colors, including a pastel blue skirt that drew immense attention, much of it mockery, in the press. She'd been on trial for previous burglaries and had proven as much a celebrity as the judge overseeing her case. That she'd taken to defending herself only heightened the circus atmosphere. You couldn't wish for a more theatrical combination of defendant and judge. "Excellent," the judge said. "That would mean the jury can deliberate over lunch, a smooth running ship at last." The assembled audience, standing room only, laughed nervously, revealing how much tension the courtroom held. In theory, Towdle should be guilty as a Labrador by a demolished birthday cake. She'd been caught red-handed in the most elaborate and movie-like theft in the history of the planet after all. But many speculated Towdle had a trick or two up her sleeve. Gambling websites gave her a 15% chance of acquittal, and even a 5% chance of escape. The third prime participant in this drama feels ordinary by comparison. Veronica Brief charted a conventional path as she rose through the prosecutorial ranks. Top grades, hard work, schmoozing, ambition, and a photographic memory. There's little reason to elaborate on her story. Veronica had aimed for calm, efficient, and professional as her persona. She let Marissa and Judge Brybar provide the entertainment. The stately prosecutor drew little mention in the tabloids despite overseeing the case of the millennium. And she'd presented a good case, which was easy in one sense because of how strong the evidence was. Someone had stolen the twin pins of Mars, diamond-encrusted spikes that ceremonially finished the oxygen dome of the first Martian city. Marissa Towdle was a known high-stakes burglar and ex-con. She'd been present at the benefit concert from which the pins were stolen. She'd purchased the chemicals needed for the distracting foam bomb that had gone off at the concert. And most damningly, one of the diamond pins had been found in her very apartment. The list of witnesses and items in evidence is so long that, again, there's little need to go into much detail. The most troubling possibility was that if the jury liked Marissa too much, that they were simply so entertained, they might ignore the evidence and vote for acquittal. Today, the defendant would make her last appeal. Today, Marissa Towdle, who'd fired her lawyers after just 4 days into the proceedings, would make her closing argument. She wasn't a lawyer, had never been to law school, and committed innumerable mistakes of law throughout the trial, but she still possessed the supernatural confidence of a legendary burglar, so she'd plowed ahead, learned from each mistake of process, always found a way to laugh with the audience as she suffered a series of sustained objections against her. The Red Planet stood entranced, listening to how she would make her final plea. Marissa Towdle rose. She was quite short, but cut a dramatic figure nonetheless. She strode to the center of the room to address the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my honored peers, good morning to you. Also, good morning to everyone watching in the live audience in this wonderful city of New Olympus and all across Mars and our sister planet of Earth. Also, a quick shout out to anyone reading the transcript in the future. That's serious dedication." Laughter. The prosecution has done a thorough job presenting the evidence against me, and I would be foolish to claim no fear. They found one of the diamond pins at my apartment. Can you believe my incredulity? Without that one piece of evidence, all they have is hearsay and circumstance. And who hasn't been hurt by hearsay and circumstance? I was sorely mistreated on the day they overturned my home. Veronica had decided early in the trial not to be surprised by anything Marissa said. Here she was, starting her final defense by bringing up the single strongest piece of evidence against her, submerging it in a strange cocktail of jokes and grievances. Still, she was as oddly compelling as she'd been the whole trial. Have I mentioned how good you look, jury? The fall weather has really brought out your fashion sense, such lovely browns and greens. I'm going to miss you all when this trial is finally over. And soon it will be over, won't it? Oh, I don't know if this is legal. Is it legal to compliment and reminisce with the jury? It is if there's no objection from the prosecution. This was the judge, now looking in Veronica's direction with a raised eyebrow. All around the court, Veronica felt all eyes suddenly on her. And it was true. She could object for relevance or ingratiation, which Mars had added to the legal code 50 years ago. No objection, Veronica said after a pause worthy of a sitcom, to titters and laughter from the audience. She hadn't intended to object at all, no matter how wild the defendant got. It's considered poor form to object during closing arguments, unless the faults are egregious. Plus, ordinary folks see through flattery and immaterial wanderings most of the time, and that should be especially so in this case. Marissa wasn't just on trial for grand theft, but also for assault. When she'd set off the foam bomb at the dedication ceremony, 3 people had been injured, and many dozens more might have been. These charges alone could add up to decades behind bars. A jury might excuse burglary if they liked a defendant, but harming innocent spectators? No way, Veronica thought. Marissa had avoided lengthy prison sentences from previous burglaries through clever negotiating, and because she'd always been careful to avoid violence. Now, she might be mere hours from a lifetime in prison. How was she so calm? At this point, Marissa had moved on to a PowerPoint presentation with a selection of quotes projected onto the large screen across from the jury, with certain words highlighted for effect. The rotten witch made all the plans and said it would be an easy score without any risk of harm to anyone. That's what one of my supposed henchmen said about me, if you'll remember. I don't see why that insult was necessary. Read the next quote, this time from a witness who supposedly saw me outside the concert hall. She was laughing like a hyena, or like some evil witch. With the shouting inside, I could barely hear her, but I was close enough I could just make out the cackle. I could read each and every one of these quotes, each more demeaning than the last, but you can look over the full list if you've got the stomach for it. So many horrible things said about me, which I don't mind. I can accept taunts and jeers. But it is certainly interesting that so many of these witnesses couldn't help but include spiteful, disparaging remarks. And you'll notice how many bring out the W word. It almost feels like they were coordinating their testimony somehow. Veronica caught a glimpse of the jury. She read ambivalence on their faces, scowls, smirks, narrowed, focused eyes, and furrowed brows. They were all paying attention, but none appeared sympathetic, and only a few seemed amused. She found it galling that Marissa would imply misconduct from the prosecution. Early in the legal process, Marissa had tried to trade the location of the second diamond pin for legal protection, which Veronica would never have agreed to, not leastwise because the police were convinced they could lean on her conspirators to produce the second pin, an assumption which, 7 weeks later, had not come true. Those negotiations were inadmissible at trial, but made Marissa's attempts to cast the prosecution as corrupt all the more preposterous. Marissa knew she was guilty, and knew the prosecution knew she was guilty. And then there's the matter of the diamond pin of peace, found in my apartment, right under my very bed. It's the linchpin of the case against me. But do you find that likely? That a supposed master criminal would conceal the single most damning evidence in the most obvious and cliched place to hide something? Ha! And that underscores my next point, that the diamond pin of prosperity is yet to be found. If I had stolen them both, why hide one in an obvious place, then another where the police have yet still to find? I'm not going to accuse anyone else of being the real thief, and therefore the person who planted the evidence while keeping half the spoils for themselves. Not right at this moment anyway. I don't have the resources of the police or prosecutors to chase leads and likely suspects. But how can you not be suspicious of these circumstances? Marissa had raised her voice by this point. Despite her grandiosity, she'd kept her tone civil, even playful. But now she strode about the floor, her jacket swirling in great red arcs. She turned to the prosecution table and approached Veronica, though even with her heels, she stood barely a few inches taller than her adversary sitting up straight. Marissa leaned over the table between them. Veronica held her gaze in as steely a manner as she could muster. She wasn't intimidated, but feared smiling at this bit of theatrics, which might send the wrong message to the jury. They've stacked things so thoroughly against me. A huge team of cops and prosecutors all working to dig up evidence. 3 of my friends called to testify against me. Hundreds of hours of security video. Reams of texts stolen from my phone. All this effort searching for any slip-up, inconsistency, or wrong place, wrong time circumstance. And in the end, their whole case rests on a single, dubious discovery. Marissa whirled on Veronica, her jacket cape swirling like a tornado. She approached the judge, held his eye contact for many moments. Veronica couldn't read her face with her back turned, but Judge Brybar's eyes narrowed, turning from amused to suspicious to worried. Only then did worry enter Veronica's own mind. Could Marissa really have a grand plan to turn the trial on its head, or even to escape? Everyone in this courtroom stands against me. I've been fighting every official and advocate aligned for a single purpose. These whole 7 weeks I've fought. She stood right before the judge now, a dark red fingernail pointed but a meter from his face. Control yourself, the judge warned, his voice steady. Marissa slowly retreated her hand to her chest, but kept the finger out. Then she approached still further and placed her hands on the edge of the bench. Judge Brybar screwed his face up in an apoplectic grimace. I kindly ask you to back away, the judge said with barely concealed rage. And Marissa did so. She turned slowly, her her jacket an eddy rather than a hurricane. The whole audience appeared to exhale at this drawdown in tension. The calm wouldn't last. The true thief, the true mastermind, is in this courtroom right now. Marissa raised her hand, extending that damning index finger clad in crimson, thrusting it high in the air like the barrel of a smoking gun. The courtroom turned deathly quiet. Marissa twirled her finger in the air, once, twice. A woman screamed in the audience. Several people stood. Veronica noticed the judge fumbling for his gavel. Why was his gavel not to hand? Veronica's photographic memory went to work, rewinding to a minute prior. The gavel had disappeared from the moment Marissa had placed her hands on the bench. When she'd made that dramatic turn, she must have. "Approach, Your Honor," Veronica called out, but was drowned out by the growing tumult of the audience. She stood and shouted, "Approach, Your Honor! Your gavel! She has your gavel in her sleeve!" The chaos intensified, cries and laughter mixing together. Judge Brybar's eyes were wide as Phobos and Deimos in the Martian night sky. The bailiffs stood frozen for a moment, but one caught Veronica's eye. They nodded at each other and sprung into motion. Veronica charged. She couldn't say why, necessarily, but the thought entered her mind that perhaps this was a grand distraction to allow Marissa some clever escape, and that was just too much of an affront to the seasoned prosecutor. It was a breach of decorum to get involved in bailiff duties, but Veronica had been a track athlete in college and had taken basic police training. And there was so much energy in the courtroom. The bailiff, a stocky woman with a tight ponytail whose expression almost never changed, her name was Lawrence, Veronica wanted to say, got there first and held Marissa under the arms. Marissa was making a show of struggling without really struggling, calling her capture a brute. Veronica held Marissa's eye contact while she riffled in her sleeves, producing the lost gavel within seconds. "I believe this belongs to you," she said with what she hoped was cinematic showmanship as she cast the gavel onto the bench. Adjourned. Adjourned. Take the defendant into custody. The judge had retrieved the cinematic hammer of justice and was banging it on the bench like a woodpecker. Slowly, the veins in his forehead receded as the bailiffs took Marissa away. Next, the judge leaned down to whisper to Veronica, "Meet me in chambers. I fear we're looking at a mistrial." Of course, a mistrial. Was that Marissa's plan? But how would this help her? More chances to escape, maybe, but then she'd surely earned tighter security from this fiasco. She'd wait in prison for the next trial, and the evidence against her would be as strong as ever. Why had she done this? Why had she made such a scene? But then, she'd so loved playing the lawyer, stirring up drama and having all eyes on her. These last 7 weeks may have been the most exciting of an already legendary life. With this performance, Marissa Towdle hadn't earned her freedom, but she'd earned another shot at being the center of the known universe, the moral of the story. The guard leading me into the room gives a hard yank on the chain. Pain lances through my neck, and I snarl, baring my impressive fangs for full effect. He shies away, naked fear on his face, before remembering which of us is supposed to be the prisoner. "Watch it, mutt, or you'll be drinking out of the toilet through a wired jaw," he says, his tough guy tone betrayed by the quaver in his voice and the stink of fear in his scent. I snort in contempt. "Oh, please, CO. We both know who's afraid of the big bad wolf." His expression hardens, mouth tightening into a white line. One hand drops to the baton sheathed at his waist. "That will do, officer," a new voice says. "I'll ask you to do your job without further violating my client's civil rights." I look past the guard and his impotent rage to see a man sitting at the lone table in the room. The space is dimly lit, a single flickering fluorescent bulb recessed in the ceiling behind a grating. But I've got good eyesight. The guy's so short his legs barely clear the edge of the chair. I take in his expensive suit, immaculately groomed hair, and a face so wrinkled and wizened it looks like a prune staked out in the desert for a week. He smells of cologne, silk, a hint of moldy straw, and... That's curious. No fear. Not a hint of that very familiar scent. Interesting. That must mean he's either stupid or a villain. Like me. The guard secures my chain to a ring on the floor, giving me just enough play to reach my side of the table, then snaps a padlock on it with a loud click. He then steps back to stand against the wall. The short man's eyes, small, dark, and hard behind wire-rimmed glasses, flick to the guard. "Leave me alone with my client, if you please." "Not a good idea, buddy," the guard says, glancing at me. "You know who this is, right?" "Of course I do," the man snaps. "I also know the privileges that exist between the accused and his legal representation. Now, must I ask again?" The guard scowls, shakes his head, and leaves, slamming the door shut behind him. The lock on the door clicks loudly, too. I casually stretch as much as I can with the chain and collar, give a shake to fluff out my thick gray fur. "Client, eh? Funny, I don't remember hiring a lawyer." The faintest of smiles ghosts across the man's face. "You haven't, yet. But I'm certain you'll want to retain my services after you hear what I have to say." "Why's that?" I ask in the most bored tone I can manage. "Because I can make sure that you don't spend the rest of your life behind bars." I can't help it. My ears prick up at that. I force a derisive snort. "Not likely. They have a pretty good case against me. And that is precisely why you want me to represent you." A positively oily grin stretches his lips. "Allow me to introduce myself." 2 fingers extend to place a business card on the table between us. I glance down at it. Mr. R, attorney at law, specialist in defense of the wrongly accused. The black letters stand out against the crisp white, cutting across a spinning wheel picked out in gold foil. Yeah, it's a dead giveaway. Mr. Ray, that'd be short for... He raises a small hand to stop me before I can say it. "I would prefer if we kept this from being a first-name relationship." Yellowed teeth glint as he grins again. "Okay," I say with a flick of an ear. "Lawyer now, huh? Previous line of work didn't suit you?" Let's just say that it was far too labor-intensive. I find my new career to be much more rewarding. It also didn't require much of an adjustment, ethically speaking. So, Mr. R, it is for now. For that matter, what would you like me to call you? I shrug, a human gesture I've perfected over the years. Most people just scream wolf and run away when they see me. I see. Then I shall address you as Mr. Wolf, for simplicity's sake. Whatever. Now, Mr. R settles himself in his hard wooden chair. "I'm familiar with the particulars of your case, Mr. Wolf, at least those that have been made publicly available, but perhaps you'd like to tell me your side of the story." Now I actually laugh. My side of the story? Not a lot of people are interested in that. As far as most of them are concerned, there's only ever one side. The one where I'm the villain, just out to do villain things. It's just how the story goes. So you don't deny the charges? Well now, Mr. R, that'd be telling, wouldn't it? I may be facing the headsman's axe or life in a cage, but I don't see any reason to make it easier on everyone. Mr. Wolf, we in the legal profession are required to keep our clients' confidence and cannot be compelled to reveal what is told us in confidence. Okay, whether he's telling the truth or not, I find I just don't care. Well, yeah, I did it. Whatever they say, I did it all. Mr. R removes his glasses, pulls out a kerchief, and starts polishing the lenses. You stalked young Peter and his friends, and attempted to murder a duck, I believe. I pretend to wince. Yeah, got so close, but she was just that lucky. I sigh. I can still taste feathers. And you destroyed the property of 3 industrious pigs? Hey, not my fault if their houses weren't up to code. Of course, then they tried to burn me alive. Lost a lot of fur on that one. Then you actually consumed a young lady and her grandmother? I give a little laugh. And the grandmother's cat. Not too many people remember that part. But I kinda missed out on the satisfaction of a good meal in the end. After I woke up on the riverbank, went through 3 surgeries to get all the rocks out of my belly, and spent 6 months in that stupid plastic cone. Well, let's just say that a certain woodsman is next on the menu if I ever get out of here. Mr. R finishes cleaning his glasses, sets them back in place, all without batting an eye. I see. So, you are guilty, and I must assume that the police have all the evidence they need, since you are sitting here before me, chained to the floor. I pull back my lips in a grin, or a snarl. Hard for me to tell the difference when I'm doing it. Like I said, I'm the villain. I do bad things. No matter how the story goes, that's always how it ends. It's the... oh, what do they call it? The moral. That's right, the moral of the story. Bad people do bad things. Mr. R arches one scraggly eyebrow. What if I told you the story doesn't have to end that way? I cock my head to one side. How's that? Mr. Wolf, my job doesn't necessarily consist of proving you innocent, Mr. R says. Not when I can make you into a victim instead of a villain. Say what? That's right, Mr. Wolf. Instead of making this about your crime, we can make it about you. We'll play up your tragic past, your difficult upbringing. Why, you said it yourself. People look at you and see nothing more than a scary animal. That's prejudice. It's colored your entire life, hasn't it? Is all I managed to get out in reply. Honestly, I'd never thought about it like that. Do you have a mate? Mr. R asks suddenly. Pups? A pack that relies on you? Needs you? What? No, nothing like that. I give my head a shake, trying to wrap my head around all this. Are you saying that you can make it look like I was the victim instead of the villain? Exactly, Mr. Wolf. Now his grin looks positively evil. We'll put you in front of the cameras, paint you a tragic victim of circumstances and biases. All that's required is the right spin on the facts. And believe me, Mr. Wolf, I know how to put the right spin on things. No doubt. All of this is confusing, and well, kinda disgusting. Look, why go through all that? Just post my bail and I'll skip town, how about? I'm only half joking. Again, he arches that eyebrow. To go on the run? To be hunted and hounded the rest of your life? Now I grin. I'm the big bad wolf, remember? What you just described, that's my normal. It doesn't have to be, says Mr. R. When I'm through, you'll spend a few months in prison, after which you'll be set up for life. A comfortable den, plenty of game to hunt. Even your own woods if you want. No one will dare bother you again. With enough positive media coverage, I can work out a very favorable deal for you. Deals are something of a specialty for me. Now, how's that sound? I stare at him, narrowing my eyes. What do you get out of this, Mr. Ray? Something tells me you're not doing it out of the kindness of your heart. He gives a short laugh. Oh, goodness, no. You see, in the process of rewriting the narrative, there will be interviews, televised appearances, at least one book deal. That means money, Mr. Wolf. Rather a lot of money. His oily grin reappears, and I get 50%. Oh, now that's disgusting. Sickening. He wants me to lie about what I am, pretend to be something I'm not. A victim. A weak, pathetic, mewling victim. And all so he can exploit my villainy for cash. I don't know, I say. It all sounds like a big lie to me. And you've never lied before? Something about his tone of voice, so cocky and superior, makes my hackles rise, literally. I seem to recall one of the charges is impersonating a little old lady. That's rather dishonest, don't you think? I growl deep in my throat. I like to think of it as deceptive. A predator has to be cunning after all. Indeed. Come now, Mr. Wolf. Let's stop bandying words. He lifts a briefcase onto the table, snaps it open, and produces a gold fountain pen with a flourish. You just sign these documents, and I'll get started turning you into the tragic victim. A victim. Me. I'm a villain. I made the choices that made me a villain. And to be honest, I never really regretted it until I got caught. If not for that woodsman, I'd still be out there, stalking Peter and his friends, blowing down pigs' houses, and looking for my next Little Red Riding Hood. But then, look where being the villain has gotten me. In this room, with a scumbag who wants me to lie, tell people a sob story, deny what I am, just so I won't be punished for the wrong I've done, and he can make a lot of money. I think Mr. R is a worse villain than I am, and he's definitely not the kind of villain I want to be. Now let's get this straightened out, I say, the words coming out from behind bared fangs. I'm a villain. I know I'm a villain. I own that. I'd rather just accept that I've done wrong and take what I've got coming. Mr. R purses his lips like he's tasted something really sour. Mr. Wolf, please be reasonable. I think you'd better get out of here, Mr. R, before I start naming names, or I could just gobble you up. Your pick. Mr. Wolf, I lunge forward, straining the chain to its limits. Planting my forepaws on the table, I let out a savage bark, jaws snapping, spattering drool all over Mr. R's nice suit and shiny glasses. He lurches backwards, tumbling out of the chair, briefcase and pen flying across the room. A second later, he scrambles back to his feet, staring at me, eyes wide, and darts for the door. Now I smell it. The fear. Its stink is thick and rank. I guess he really isn't stupid. With one hand on the doorknob, he pauses, glancing back at me. You know they will never stop seeing you as a villain. They will hunt and persecute you, no matter what you do. Maybe so, I reply, suddenly tired of this whole thing. But maybe I've earned that. Maybe if I want that to change, I need to show them that I can change too. I shrug. So even though I'm the villain in this story, maybe I can still do the right thing. Maybe that's the moral of the story. When I read Beckett, in this room, cursed room, loved, cursed, where she slept, half grown in her hometown t-shirt, shorts, no shorts, t-shirt worn with holes, on the floor, he having thrown it, under the bed, dust collected and swept and settled again, and again. Who? He. Not she. Gracious. There for the first time. Assuredly last time. No boys in the room, Father said. Keep out. Nodded her head. But in the room, blue light hugging the window, scotch tape, peeling off the paint, whether chipped or freshly laid or exhumed. He found her in the... No, not found. Held her in, under doomed blankets. A thumb, under a thumb, twisted under a thumb, urgently, unabashedly, shackled by his name, no name, names unknown. 2 in the bed, 1, world flaring by, unedited film chopped and hacked, a sore thing, ulcers blooming somewhere, holes in her memory, in her body. Hush now, but the slicing. Hush, I say, feeling her own atomic skeleton, so quickly destroyed, so quickly defiled, so quickly filled, it might serve to relax, dissociate, but incapable, already unaware. The girl, but the girl, remember what? Remember the party, supposed to be where, with whom, taken home with. She left the house, in the evening, bottles on the porch, tequila stinging chapped mouths. He pours, and pours, and pours, and pours, and disappears, a spoon of sugar in a wet glass. Moon casts a shadow, bloody crescent. Stray sequins scratch her shins. They flake off. She is whisked away, smells distilled. The party. What party? The secret of where it is, where it was. Must have been. Seen by people scantily dressed. A stain on the night. She wore. The idea of what she wore, received poorly, with exhilaration. Noted, clicked, recorded and frozen forever as she was. Those flashes, bright in her eyes, phone cameras glinting, periphery irritated, some kind of no man's land, couldn't breathe, too hot, couldn't hear her voice, escape, wanting it all to fade to black, anywhere else but here. So leave, let out into vapor. Where did she go? Seen? By anyone? Taken home. Transported, goods handled. Express shipping for dolls. Laid to rest in a bed of bubble wrap. Resting, in bed. Then, a stranger. No, not a stranger. Couldn't be a stranger. To know her bed, in her room. Been in her room before, but father said no. Yet, so-called friend. Always easily trusted. Hand on her lower back. Her sentences half finished, since days with Velcro shoes. There like a mole, constant, dependable. Then he. Then swam in her mouth, syllables of his name. They're in her teeth, to be scooped out by dental floss. Stuck, tip of her tongue. His finger on her pocked tongue. A moment of gagged silence. Lips form sounds learned in primary school. Not a scream. Some sounds. Vowels from when she was small, and the words tasted new. Like a finger. A thumb. No. Like English. Children who knew the flavor. But she. The bitterness. She. Muffled sounds in play and muffled sounds. Out of touch. English more like aspic to her. At the time. At that point. But somehow she found but one universal language in hands and dirt under fingernails. Fingernails on skin, raking on skin, touches, sticking to drool, dirty kisses on monkey bars, language of friendship. A friend who understood her warped words, English forgotten, shoulder by shoulder, kisses with friends, wood chips licking open shoes, pigtails on her head with the little bows, and she forced herself to smile, yanked by the ends, tickled by the belly, touched. Little boys, being boys. She did not realize, long before parties, she did not realize, laying in the bed, pigtails long gone, gone where? Time spilled over from a cup, splaying. No, spreading. On the duvet, uncovered. But why? The thought of, at the party, or rather, God. Zippers undone, knots untied, laces in her shoes, unlaced, command strips flayed from a mirror shattered on the floor, cut feet in the morning, spliced. She struggles, finds herself out of herself. A second of incomprehension, hours, spanning hours, erased and unnoticed by a blink. Gosh, but her mind, a washing of sorts, reckoning with punishment, lack of evidence, guilty, punishment, guilt in a sealed box open only to her, vanished memory, insufficient evidence, inadmissible, poured out in measured shots. Now love is an apparition in the wall, friendship buried in a shallow grave, unseen, slipping through a groping fist, strange fist groping at her native tongue resurfaces from the cradle, from mother's milk, forming sounds like no, foreigners deaf to no, adequately expressed. Speak English, but she can't. Gibberish garbled in her throat, congealed from the inside. Speak. Error. Speak. Error. Suddenly. Indubitably. He. Unadmitted. Swine. Door left unlocked, having forgotten to lock. Brought her home without keys. Carried on his shoulder. A friend. Helping hand. By a friend. Since she met him. Day one. Fat black eyes, dirty handshake. Playgrounds. Those same pigtails sinuous in his fingers. Friendship. Firm. Invitations to places. Introductions to people. Been in her room before. Some cousins to know of. Mario Kart in his basement. Pizza on trampoline forts. Sharing generously. Growing new body parts. Sheltered. Without doubt. Certainly not. How could she, not to see it coming? A girl and a boy, together, as friends, not to trail the wicked scent. Perhaps unassuming, perhaps mistaken, unaware, naive, guilty, secretly wanting, once or twice a flirt, in sobriety dripping with meaning. He reads, pours tequila into shot glasses. Her language stinks of filth to interpret as, in that tight skirt. Combinations of, stop right there. Can it? When it comes down to it. Guilty, guilty, guilty. There in her body, there in her hands. And the cameras. A still life. Friends seeing it happen. Seeing it all happen. Indelible. The guilty party. Fine. Let it be this way. Crumbs for the world, chewed on in daylight. School hallways chattering like shivering teeth. Goosebumps. Her flesh. Feed the hungry. Fed to friends. He. Notches in his ribs. On her. Grating. Somewhere in the room. But she can't speak. Can't see. On the desk somewhere. A hairbrush. A stone. To fight with. Fight back. She can't move. Fight back. And hurt a friend. How the story goes. Pitched in the courtroom. Self-defense. When judgment day comes. And if it comes, who protects friends? She. Language unserving. There in her body. There in her hands. There in her body. There in her hands. A friend. And she says nothing. Does nothing. In this room. Petrified. You would never have noticed it if you weren't looking for it. That was precisely the point. The instructions given in my embroidery group had been clear enough. After nightfall, take a stroll on the second lane past the bakery, look for the unlit lamppost, and turn down that dark alley, they said in hushed voices as the pianist began playing in sudden loud fervor. By coincidence. Then you will see a mossy stone staircase, which you will descend, and at the end of it, there is a dim hallway. She lives through the set of green doors on the left. The doors are tall and French like my husband's mistress, but peeling and weathered. I can tell they were once painted a lovely shade of emerald green. Half of that green paint lies in small piles of flakes on the cobblestone. I debate knocking and decide instead to reach with false confidence for the rusted copper handle. It turns downward easily. A small bell rings and echoes. Welcome. On the posters she is grotesque, an example of how time and sin turn a person sour. But in person she has the kind of enduring beauty you can't tear your eyes away from. Do come in, darling. Don't be shy. Contrary to popular belief, I don't bite. Although I can't say nothing here does. Her voice is like a wind chime, melodic and resonating, barely brushing over the crashing waves of her words. I wonder if I'm here too long, if that voice will drag me out to deep sea. Or did that only work on men in the myths? Take a seat, love. Yes, there is perfect. Would you like a cup of tea? Well, it's never too late for tea, is it now? I enjoy it late into the night myself, but maybe you've been raised more proper than that. Here, the cup is warm, not hot. If she noticed my shaking hands when reaching for it, she didn't say a word. It takes more than a few seconds for my eyes to adjust to the warmly lit room after a dark and shadowy street. Among her many talents, it cannot be said that she was a good decorator. The shabby boards of the walls are empty, but for an assortment of faded newspaper clippings from the highlights of her anonymous career. Obituaries, mostly. A tattered blue curtain with tassels hangs behind the armchair she's perched in, dividing off part of the room. Eccentrically painted shelves house arrays of books and bottles of objects my gaze prefers not to settle on. She would have been called a witch for her collections had she not already acquired numerous more colorful nicknames by the public. The only item of some value is worn loosely around her slender wrist, a heavy and ornate gold watch. The kind of thing that would make a petty thief's day to see glinting underneath a man's sleeve in the street. She catches me admiring it and smiles thinly, holding up her arm up to eye level. Isn't it a beauty? It was my first husband's, this watch. On the 10th anniversary of his death, I'm going to smash it to bits and melt the gold into a necklace for myself. I deserve a little gift from him, I think. Her laugh unnerves me, but I find myself too curious to be afraid. I politely say my condolences for her husband's death. Oh, darling, don't be sorry that that man is dead. The one good thing he did was to be the inspiration for the charity work I do. I haven't always done this. I used to be an actress, you know, a leading lady of the stage. Men would come from all over the city to see my shows, for I was beautiful then. Sometimes after the shows, they would approach me, usually blind drunk, complimenting my dress or what was underneath it, asking for a kiss or a drink or a night. And sometimes they didn't ask. My husband became my husband not because he asked, but because he damaged me. And he was rich enough to get away with it, and clever enough to know that marriage was my only option. She smooths down the skirt of her maroon dress, then looks up at me with a solemn expression I can't fully read. It isn't hard to believe she was once a sought-after woman. Though sunken in age, her cheeks are smooth, and her face looks as though it was hand-carved out of porcelain by God. Her hair is twisted into a dark crown atop her head, secured with metallic pins. Her eyes are like a cat's, but not a house cat. No, definitely not. Like those of a tiger that has been left to go hungry for far too long. I will her to continue talking and not look at me with those eyes again. We sip our tea in unison, upholding our masquerade as ladies. She takes in a breath. He said he loved me, and at the beginning, I believed it. He may have loved me. He certainly desired me. I think mostly he loved seeing the desire and jealousy of other men when he told them I was his wife. But that got old fast. So did I, in his eyes. When it had been a year, and I still had not given him a child, I turned ugly to him, and he acted ugly accordingly. One night, he came home from the pub talking about how the other men's wives had filled their houses with children by now. He spoke of babies like cattle. Then he threatened that he ought to tell the whole town that I was secretly a whore and leave me. I should have kept quiet and obeyed and smothered him in his sleep, like a good wife. Instead, I promised him that as long as I was alive, I would never let a child be born cursed enough to have him as a father. I'm sure you know what happens next, or otherwise you wouldn't be here, my darling. She traces a scar on her chin that I hadn't noticed before, extending along her jaw to the start of the delicate bones of her neck. I imagine it snaking around the rest of her throat in a ring, strangling her pale skin, and my breath catches. It looks as if lightning struck her. She was struck, though not by something as rare as lightning. I instinctively touch my collarbone, where I know without looking there is a ghastly bruise. My modest neckline covers it, but somehow it feels like she knows it's there. My mark of pain. I hope it goes away quickly, so my husband does not think me unsightly. But then again, perhaps that will not be necessary. I nod at her meekly to show that I do know what happens next. I can't say whether he truly meant to kill me, but to hurt me, to wound me, to make my thoughts and words disappear in flames. He meant that with all his heart. The funny thing is, it was him who made my words true. Of course, he couldn't have known that I was with child. Even I did not know then. After, no one would ever get to know. I made a gravestone, although there was nothing to bury. And then, a month later, I buried my poor, sick husband next to it, marked only with a slab that did not bear his name. Wealthy and beloved as his gold in his life, in death, he became only stone. The disease had taken him so quickly that there was no time for anyone to save him. Shame on chance to take him from this world so young. Got him like poison, essentially. The porcelain around her eyes cracks faintly in amusement. I have nothing to say in response. My mind stuck on the picture of a crude gravestone smaller than it should be. Now, love, how would you like your tragedy to occur? The widows in my town all chose differently. Most agree that the worst methods are only to be used for the worse husbands, but sometimes there is no rhyme or reason to it. After all, all's fair in love and war. Millions of second and third and fourth thoughts crossed my mind on the way here. But now those voices are silent, and there is only mine. Mine and hers, and the input of the hissing wind outside. Well, what will it be? In 2 weeks, it will happen. On the way home after a day of work, my husband will feel a bout of hopelessness that gives him a nudge to hurl himself off of the local bridge. The river below is not a kind one, especially to those who never learned to swim. He will have been drunk, since he often is, and everyone knows how he gets when he's drunk. No one will discuss a death as taboo as taking your own life. My children and I will cry and wear black for weeks, though no longer than what is expected. At the same time, the black of our bruises will fade. He won't be missed very much, really. Perhaps that French woman will miss him, but she would have met the man that I knew soon enough. I will decide to raise my children in the countryside alone, and we will be happy. I cannot say yet whether I will regret it. The final time I will see the woman's wild tiger's eyes, She will tell me that not once has she regretted anything in her life. She will say that it was a pleasure to do it, and fearfully I will believe her. "Oh, it really is getting late, love. Your family must be at home expecting you." I reply that they are, and I thank her for her kindness, nervously reaching to shake her hand. How much blood has coated it? On the posters, they say she has killed 3 men, but I know these were simply the times she wanted it enough to make it gruesome. The posters also envision her as grotesque, which means that they have not ever seen her, or the mark on her jaw from her fall after being struck by lightning. The posters know nothing. The men know nothing. We women must stick together, yes? The image of my young daughter appears and consumes my mind. I would do everything in my power to ensure she never has to know the instructions to get here. There will be no scars for my girl to trace. I will make sure of that. I nod and drop the woman's unassuming porcelain hand. Beneath the sound of her wind chime voice is a softer noise I hadn't paid attention to before, almost like a breeze rustling through dying trees, overlaid with the humming of the earth. It is separate from the wind and the rushing of my blood. She notices my piqued interest, and rather than say anything, stands, chuckles, and regally draws back the tattered blue curtain behind her. In view now is a cage filled with twisting and writhing scaled bodies, hissing and competing with each other for air. They move as one, a trembling monster of green. I step back in sudden horror. She isn't looking at me, but I see her eyes flash ravenously. "You don't have to worry about them, darling. Their venom is reserved for the venomous. Just another dead girl underwater. Trigger. Warning. Implications of death, violence, and sexual harassment. By the time the fisherman finds me, I will have been dead for 33 hours, 6 minutes, and 29 seconds. 18 hours since the police declared me missing. 15 hours since Zoe told my biology teacher that my tent was empty, that I hadn't returned from the party we'd snuck out to the night before. Careful, quiet, every twig a possible snitch. It was exhilarating, our hearts pounding, the smell of pine and seaweed thick in the air, and the moon a perfectly curved sickle. Zoe held my sweaty hand and didn't let go until we'd passed the tents and joined the others by the lake. The music on someone's phone was turned down just low enough for us to make out Billie Eilish's raspy voice. One of the guys offered us a beer, kept cool in the pitch-black, lurking water. I remember thinking I couldn't tell where the lake ended and the forest began. The first article published by a local newspaper reads, "Promising high school student missing after night, swim in lake." Shortly after, the Water Rescue Service and Fire Brigade take over the search. Dogs comb the area, their noses trailing through the damp earth. A human chain forms, people moving slowly through the woods, eyes scanning for any sign of me. Even a helicopter hovers overhead, its whirring blades slicing through the heavy, charged air. The search drags on for hours, stretching into the twilight, yet the woods remain silent. The police begin to ask questions. When was she last seen? What was she wearing? Had she been drinking? Did she seem out of character? Angry? Sad? Suicidal? No. No and no. She was singing. She was dancing. She seemed happy. When the fisherman finds my body, miles away from where I was last seen, certainty sets in. The autopsy reveals a hematoma on my head and purple spots behind my ears. The coroners examine the water in my lungs and confirm that I wasn't dead before entering the water. I died by drowning. My classmates are questioned again. Zoe claims to have left early, while I stayed behind with her twin brother, Tom, who has been in love with me since middle school. Tom's behavior strikes the police as odd. He insists he barely spoke to me, despite people seeing us leave the party together for a few minutes. When my body is examined, traces of Tom's skin are found on my clothes, trapped between the fabric layers. Still, Tom sticks to his story, perhaps because the truth would embarrass him for some reason. Or maybe he's just afraid of the questions that would follow, and the scrutiny that might come with them. Tom is right, in the broadest sense. We really only exchanged 3 or 4 sentences that night, but only because Tom's mouth was otherwise occupied with me. I had enjoyed every second of it, and looking back, I wish I'd given him a real chance. But I was too worried about what other people might think. So, as usual, I brushed him off, leaving him to walk away from the party feeling hurt. Cassandra insists she heard Zoe and me arguing that night, just before Zoe headed back to the campsite. According to her, we were fighting over Tom. Of course she would say that. What else would 2 girls argue about if not a boy? Cassandra even claims that Zoe pushed me, though Zoe denies it vehemently. She denies discussing Tom at all, insisting it was about something else, something that wouldn't come to light until much later, when our biology teacher became a suspect. But Cassandra holds firm to her version. The thing about Cassandra is that she's always been a shadow, the kind of girl whose name teachers forget after 2 weeks of spring break. Kelly? Cindy? Carrie? Something with a C though, right? So when she finally gets the chance to talk to the police and be part of the investigation, she jumps at it. Unfortunately, Cassandra isn't much help to the investigators. She leaves the party at 2 a.m., just 40 minutes before I die, leaving me alone with a group of guys who've brought along some tranquilizers. Sitting next to them felt like being stuck in a fever dream where Jacques Derrida explains quantum physics at a frat party. At some point, I decided it was time to head back. One of the guys casually asked if I needed someone to walk with me, and I said yes, but no one moved. I glanced back, the campsite faintly visible through the cold, white light filtering through the pines. It was only a few meters away, just beyond the trees. I'd walked this path for days, never once feeling threatened by the shadows in the bushes. But tonight, that sinking feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. Still, I refused to be that girl, the one who got scared at every creak in the dark, the one who needed someone to hold her hand for a few steps. So I stood up and said I'd walk alone. Instead of sticking to the dark trail, though, I decided to take a small detour along the riverbank. A bit longer, a bit lighter, and hopefully a bit safer. One of the guys told me to text him when I made it to my tent, but when I didn't, no one even noticed. 16 days after my death, suspicion begins to shift toward our biology teacher. Devin, one of my classmates, reveals that he had felt ill that night and went looking for the teacher's tent, only to find it empty. Soon after, the teacher's behavior takes a strange turn. He starts making inconsistent statements that don't add up. One day, he calls Zoe into his office after class, where he insists that his earlier proposal to her before the trip had been nothing but a joke. She understood that, right? It was sarcasm, he says, claiming that what he really meant was that if she wanted to improve her grades, she should consider attending a tutoring service. And this is where Cassandra steps in for the final time. She confesses that she visited our biology teacher after the party, and that they went to the boathouse, where, according to her, nothing bad happened. He was just there for me. The biology teacher is immediately suspended, but the case against him has nothing to do with mine, as Cassandra's alibi clears him. Meanwhile, The suspicions surrounding Zoe and Tom are too weak to pursue. My case remains unsolved, and eventually, people begin to accept the idea that it was just a tragic accident, that I must have hit my head when I jumped into the water. They agree that I seemed unhappy, not just that night, but in general, and that my relationship with my parents, who expected me to excel in everything, was strained. Perhaps the pressure had finally got to her. It's all unsatisfying, of course. Unsatisfying for the local magazine, whose updates eventually dry up. Unsatisfying for the police, left with yet another unsolved case on their desk. Unsatisfying for my parents, who, decades later, will say in an interview that not a day goes by that they don't think of their little girl. Maybe one day a classmate will write a college essay about my case, reflecting on how it taught them that life can end in an instant. Maybe my story will end up on a true crime podcast, or perhaps Netflix will stretch it into a tightly structured 8-episode miniseries where my body is discovered just 3 minutes in. Enough time for viewers to decide if they'll keep watching. Or maybe none of this happens, and I'll fade away, like countless other women who are silenced every day, simply for being born the wrong sex. It doesn't matter who profits from my story. It doesn't even matter if they eventually find the 2 men I crossed paths with on my way back to the campsite, in the wrong place at the wrong time. None of this matters, because in the end, I'm just another dead girl underwater,